with data that is fetched from the server. All right, so let us do that. We're going to start with the front end. Now, my favorite front end IDE is one called WebStorm. WebStorm is not free, but it is, in this case, going to be almost identical to Visual Studio Code. Unfortunately, I do not know much about Visual Studio Code. There are plenty of tutorials online if that is something that you would like to go look into. I heavily suggest going to look into that. Then you can come back here and play around with this particular tutorial, or you can just open up any editor of any kind and follow along with this tutorial. There's nothing specific about WebStorm that is going to be required. I will also be using Pycharm. Again, the community version of Pycharm for this particular use case will be fine, and I will try and keep it only using things that you will have access to in the community edition of Pycharm. So again, let's start with the front end. So we're going to create a new project. In this case, we're going to stick with an empty one. We're going to create a pretty basic website to display the price, branding, colors, and model of a set of pens. So we're going to call it the pen shop and create. Okay, so here's our basic here, just everything we need. We're going to start with a new HTML file, and we're going to call this index.html. Now, this is going to fill in the absolute very basics of a HTML file. This just, if you don't have something that auto creates this, just take a moment here, pause the video, and fill in this information into your file minus the title. We're going to change the title. So let's start by calling it Pen Shop. And this will be the title that shows up in the address bar when you open up the site. All right, so we're going to start down here in the body by creating a very basic table. So we're going to have a table. We're going to have it with an ID so we can get it later, pen table. There we go, and don't forget to close all of your stuff. All right, we're going to have a table row, and the table row will have table headers. And that's where the TH comes from. We're going to call the first one, we're going to say brand, and then we're going to have another one, and that's going to be the color. And then we're going to get one more here, and this one's going to be model, and then the very last one here, and this one's going to be the price. Awesome. So now if we just, right click, and then we're going to come down here and open in browser. We'll open in my default browser. Here you go. You can see we have this. Now this doesn't really look quite right. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here. We're going to add some basic styling to it. And the basic styling will be table, TD, border, one pixel wide, solid black, and then we're going to add a little bit of padding to the actual elements themselves, and that's going to be 5 pixels, and this is just to make it a little bit easier to read once stuff is in there. So we do that, and then we're going to refresh, and you see we get these nice little borders and some padding around here to make things pretty and nice. Awesome. So the next set of piece of information that we need to do is now we need to create a pretty simple backend. And we'll come back to the front end once we have a backend in place. And that's just so we can build around that. Okay, so we're going to come over here and open up Pycharm. In Pycharm, we'll create a new project. We're going to, in this case, we're going to do pure Python. We are using Flask, and if I click here, it will generate a base file in Flask for me, a starting app, but that I do not believe is available to you if you are using the free tier, the community edition. So we'll take this opportunity to just do pure Python, and I'll show you how to do this, and that way you don't need Pycharm either to do this, and everything will be set up for you. So we're going to start We're going to call this pen shop API. And then hit create. And you can name this whatever you want. I'm calling it pen shop. Now here are the niceties that I really like about Pycharm is it will create this virtual environment for me so I don't install any of my packages globally. They're only installed locally for this project. Now this is not a requirement if you have Flask already installed. All right, and then we're going to create a new file and we're going to call it requirements.txt. And then we are going to install Flask. And then here we'll see this install here. But if we want to, we can come down here to the terminal and we can do pip install our requirements. And that's just going to install our requirements for us. And it would be the same as if I did it from up here. It's just, that's a Pycharm specific thing that it would prompt me for that. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a Python file and I'm going to call it main.py. Yeah, and then we're going to build out our basic API here. So from Flask, import Flask, we're going to need JSONify and make response. And you'll see why we'll need some of these coming up here really soon. So we're going to start by initializing our app, and it's going to be a Flask app with name. And this is pretty boilerplate stuff. If you just go on the website, it will get you started pretty quickly in the beginning tutorial. All right, and then here we're going to set up our route. So this is going to be, say if we go to my domain, so actually we'll do this with HTTPS, right, or HTTP. And then we do my domain.com, right? So this is your domain, right? Your fully qualified domain. You can have API, which is a subdomain of your domain, right? So API dot, so your subdomain is API. Your top level domain is .com, and your domain itself is my domain in this situation. And then here for our route is everything after .com. So we do /API /pens if we wanted to have a GET request or a POST request to to this here specific path, right? So in this case, because we are doing an API, we'll start with /API, which is a general convention. Although you can forego that if you have a API dot subdomain or any other kind of pattern. You can make your own pattern in this case. And then we want to get pens, right? That is our pattern here. So we're going to declare that we want that. And this will be our route in this case. The /API /pens, and then we're going to assign methods to it. Now you don't have to assign these methods, but it's a good idea to be explicit whenever possible. So here we're saying that this particular route will only deal with GET requests if you are targeting this path, which is exactly what we want in this case. So then we'd have pens, and pens doesn't need to necessarily take anything in. Because our path here doesn't have any arguments that we're taking in, and it is a GET request. So then we'll do response data equals, and we're just going to hard code our data in this situation, and it's going to be a list, right? So we're going to take this, and it's going to be brand, and we're going to have the brand of a Lamy, which is a nice German pen. Model, which will be the All-Star. And the price, we're going to make the price a very realistic 37.60. Then we can have a color, and this one is going to be the current 2020 special edition color. I'm not sure how to pronounce that color. Termalian, blah, blah. I'm bad at pronouncing things. So bear with me here. And we're going to have another one. This one's going to be a little bit of a higher end pen. It's going to be of the 2000 model. The price will be $175.20. And the color will be Mark Rollon, which again, I don't think I pronounced that right. But this is also a very nice pen. There's a really nice finish to it. All right, so we're going to create a response to send back to the to the client side, which will be our JavaScript and our HTML. Now, this just allows us to, we're just going to assign this to a variable because we're going to need to edit the headers after we create the response, the base response. And we want to send this JSON data. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to JSONify the response data. And then we're going to have response.headers. Now, the reason why we're making the response.headers a thing here is because we need to modify our access control allowance for origins, right? Our access control or allow origins to allow star. Now, you should never, under any circumstances, ever push to production with this specific with this line in your code. This star should be only set to domains that you want to execute code from. If it is not, this will break down some of the protections that the browser gives you by default. All right, so here is a very important line. Please change this before you go to production. If you are serving the front end and the back end on the same domain, no different subdomain, no different port, you don't need this line, and you can skip this. We'll go over that in a couple seconds here, and just return just the JSONified data. All right. So this is if you're hosting on two separate domains. This requires that the port number is the same as well, right? So if your port number is different, you need this. If you're hosting with something like Nginx or Apache, you can just return JSONify response data. This will work only if you have a proper web server, a full web server that can host the front end and the back end separately. All right, and then we only want this to run if the server is if we're executing the server as an application. We don't want it to run if we're executing the server outside of that. So we'll do if name equals main, and then this will be app.run. Beautiful. Now what we'll do is we'll come down here. We're going to clear this, right? That was Command K. I'm on a Mac. So we're going to export Flask app equals main.py. You'll notice that this here name here matches up with my file here. It's very important that these two match up. Okay. And then here we'll Flask run. There we go. Our server is now running. So if I come back over here, click here, and I can just boom. There we go. And you'll see that I'm getting a 404 page not found, and that's because we want to go to pens. There we go. So here you'll see we have our JSON data. You'll see the two Lamy pens are showing up nicely. Perfect. All right. So now let's integrate this into our front end. Now what we want is we want this brand to be populated with the two Lamys, the colors with the two colors, the models with the two different models, and the prices with the two different prices. So we're going to do that now. All right. So now this is where we stop coding in HTML and CSS and we switch over to some JavaScript, because this is going to take JavaScript. Now keep in mind, I am not a front-end developer. My specialty is back-end. So my JavaScript is not necessarily going to be the best. I heavily suggest that you do not do this in for production purposes. It wouldn't necessarily be the best to do it in raw JavaScript. I would heavily suggest maybe a framework like React or Angular or Vue, maybe, whatever floats your boat, whatever is popular in your area or whatever you're currently working in. This is just a general idea. Anyways, so let's just to get you started. We're going to start by creating a const. This just means that we can't re-reference this element. So if we try and re-reference the object, the variable that we're creating, it will error out. We can modify it though, but that's fine. So here we're going to just make the different elements that we want. We're going to want brand, color, model, and price. And then const fetch. We're going to create this as a what's called a lambda using the fat arrow notation. So this here is essentially the same as function fetch pens, like this. So these two would be equivalent, but this is faster to execute because it does not have some extras that the other one does. So we like to use this when we can get away with it. All right, so we're going to execute a fetch, and this is going to be on HTTP /127.0.0.1, and it's port 5000 by default for our Flask API, and it's going to be pens. Now you'll notice that this lines up here with this, and that's very important. If they do not line up, this will not work. So again, you want this and this to be the same. Also, if you change the port away from 5000, which is the default, to something else, you will have to change this. And this just refers to your local system. In production, this will change to this. All right. And then we're going to do a dot then, because this is an async function, so we can do additional steps after it is finished executing the fetch. And here we would take in the return value of this as the argument response, and we're just going to pull out response.json, right? And then we'll do a then again, and this way we don't have to create a variable and then execute the variable provided that it has data. This just makes this a little bit easier. We'll call it pens, right? So that says, hey, the response from this should have JSON data, and then we can just serialize that into JSON from a string, and then we'll call it pens in our next function when we actually operate on it. And here we're going to do so this means that we're only executing a single line. So just execute this one line and call it a day, and it will return this value back, right? So this is essentially like writing this, right? Or, you know, if we wanted to, we could also do it as a function that takes in response and then returns response.json. And this is an anonymous function called a lambda, right? In this specific situation, this is technically a lambda as well, but we're assigning it to a variable. But because we don't actually need to reference it as anything, we can do this. So we're going to have two for loops, and we want to use I as the index because that's traditional convention here. So we'll declare let I, and that way we can change I without having to worry. This just says that we can only declare it once. Okay, so we'll create a const, which again, remember that does not allow you to re-reference. It means that it can still be modified as long as the reference is the same. Now it's very important that the reference is the same. So we'll grab the pen. So this is where this ID down here comes in handy, is where we're doing get element. So we call the document, which is the entire thing, everything after doc type. And we say get the element by ID. So it's like, okay, so document, hey, I want something with the I want the element that contains this ID. So it goes through all of the stuff to here, finds this pen table ID, and then returns it. Now, in HTML, you can only have one ID. If you have more than one ID, it is syntactically incorrect. And I'm not actually sure what happens because I've not done that. I think it just returns the first one that it comes across. So here we're going to save ourselves a little bit of time by grabbing, pre-computing, and saving the length of how many children this has. Children dot length. All right. And then here, the reason we want to do that is because we're going to be using it in a couple places, and every time you call dot length, there's a compute time, right? Versus accessing a variable, no compute time. Well, less compute time. All right, so for I equals 1, if I is less than pen table length I++. So here we want to say that if there's more than one, because by default we have one, so if there's extras, go there. And then because we always want to start, right, with one in the bank, we want this. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do pen table dot delete. Did I spell pen table wrong? No. Okay, delete row. We're just going to delete the first row. That means any row after this one. All right, and this is just to clear it so we don't have a stacking thing. So for I equals 0. Usually, traditionally, we always start our for loops with 0. And then I is less than pens dot length. And then I++. And we're going to do const again. Whenever possible, you always want to try and use const. Pen row equals document dot create element. And here we're going to create a table row. All right, and then we're going to do pen elements dot map, right? And then element, right? And then we're going to do multiple things in here. So in here, what we want to do is we want to create another const of td. So this is going to be a table directory. And it's going to be a document.create. We're going to take this td and assign it an inner HTML. And it's going to be of the value contained in pens and then I, which is referenced to this I up here, right? And then we want the element. And what happens is when we do this map here, it's saying go over each one of these one by one, right? And it's going to be each one of these. So the first time this goes over, this is going to loop over 4 times. So the first one is going to be element, and it's going to be brand. Then the second element will be color. Third element will be model, and the fourth element will be price. And this will just allow us to grab them and do it this way. So then we can do pen row, right? So this one here, dot append child pen td. And that's saying take this element that we just created and append it to here. Beautiful, right? And then what we want to do now that we've created a full row is we want to take that and we're going to pen table dot append child and pen row. So here we're taking this element here that we got out of here and we're appending, so we're adding to the end of it with pen row, sorry. And that will just drop this element here that we just created directly after this tr. Okay. And now let's make it so it auto refreshes. Fetch pens, right? So we want to always have it automatic, like on first load, we want it to go fetch the pens right away and populate these fields. But after that, we want to keep, keep going and grabbing them over and over again, right? So we'll do fetch pens. And here you'll see that I did not add these rounded braces to here. And that is because this is to be executed at a later time. So let's do it every 5 seconds, which is going to be 5,000 milliseconds. There we go. And we're done. We have a basic system going, right? This is executing, la-di-da, all that's great. And now we can refresh and you'll see that it now populated. Now, if we go to inspect here, and we go over to network, every now and then you'll see that we'll get a new pens back here. See, we just did pens again. We can look at the preview and we can see our elements and see it got it again. So now what if we want to update the value of this particular 2000 Lammy or add another element, right? So let's add another one. Let's add, there's another really nice Lammy that we'll add here. So we'll copy and paste, right? And then we'll come over and grab ourselves a nice pen. One sec, give me one moment here to grab it. Pens.com. These guys are really cool. We're gonna go to Lammy. And we're gonna grab this, I think it's the stainless steel version of this. Yeah, here we go. So there's very little change that we have to do here. So it's just going to be changing the color from this one to stainless steel. And then we also have to update this price. Bang. Beautiful. Now we'll see here that it's not updating, right? We're still not getting the new data. And that's because this is hard coded, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to stop the server and run the server again. Now without fail, like obviously we just had a response fail, but look, oh my God, now we have 3 pens, 3 Lammies are now in here. So it auto updated, and while it was failing, it just didn't do anything because it just didn't execute properly. And because we wrapped everything up in this fetch, then the second this one failed, none of this happened. This didn't happen. Well, this one attempted to happen, but because it failed, this didn't happen. And it failed. Well, it failed right here because we didn't return JSON, and it was expecting JSON. But we're also going to clean this up. And then we're going to do a really, really, really quick performance optimization to our code here. And what that's going to look like is we're going to do const pen count equals pens.length. Now this might seem a little odd, but this actually gets recalculated every single time you go through the for loop. So if we do pen length, sorry, not pen length, pen count, we only calculate it once, and it's faster. So we do that. And that's the basics of how to do this. And now you have this beautiful stuff, and you'll see it still works. Yeah. So if you enjoy, smash the like button, maybe smash the subscribe. I stream periodically on Twitch at pseudokid. Feel free to give me a follow there if you would like. Although I do not do this type of stuff on my Twitch stream. I do Elixir backend development and mostly Dart and Flutter front-end development because I'm making an app. So, but feel free to stop by and say hi. All right, and thank you for sticking around, and have a good day.